You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's talk about what they certainly could use, but they are not the most pressing needs for the Orange. These are positions where if they add someone, that's great, but I would not necessarily shell out top dollar, top NIL money to fill this position group. Let's start with on offense. We're going to go offense, then defense. Outside wide receiver. You got Jackson Meeks, who's out of eligibility. Jackson Meeks had a terrific year coming over from Georgia. Didn't do a whole lot much with Georgia. And then this season has a massive, massive breakout. One of Syracuse's leading receivers and one of the leading receivers in the ACC. He was really impressive. And in fact, I would not be surprised if he gets a look in the NFL. I would not be surprised if he's at an NFL training camp this coming off season. I wouldn't. He had that good of a year with Syracuse football. He's out of eligibility, okay? The reason why I would say it's not the biggest need is because you have to look at who's still on the roster here. You got a four-star in Emmanuel Ross waiting in the wings. He barely got any playing time, but he's a four-star guy from 2024. So maybe he takes on a bigger role. You also got Zeed Haynes with eligibility. He was the starter in the first two games. He started ahead of Jackson Meeks, but personal issues kept him out for the rest of the season. But I still have high hopes in Zeed Haynes, and assuming he doesn't enter the portal himself, I think he can enter next season as a starting outside wide receiver for this team. Umari Hatcher, if he comes back, he's got years of eligibility left. I think we all know what he is, but am I willing to shell out top dollar to try to upgrade Umari Hatcher when we have needs on the offensive line and the quarterback position and linebacker? No. Umari Hatcher's a fine piece. Darrell Gill has eligibility. He's a fine piece. Justice Ross Simmons has eligibility. He's a fine piece. So they do, I guess, kind of have a need because Jackson Meeks is out of eligibility. So they're going to need someone to step up. But you could definitely look in-house for a replacement. It's not the most pressing need in the world. So when I go out and I see Kevin Concepcion, I know I'm mentioning a name here, enter the transfer portal, he's going to command top dollar. A lot of top programs are going to go after him. I wouldn't be mad if Syracuse football got him, but he's not their number one target. Let's just put it that way. He would not fill the biggest need for Syracuse football. So that's outside wide receiver. They kind of could use one, but it's not the most pressing need in the world. Running back and tight end, I'm going to group together here, okay? The running back's LeQuint Allen. Their tight ends, Oronde Gadsden. Both have another year of eligibility left. However, we're not sure with either of them if they're going to be back for different reasons. With Oronde Gadsden, he's most likely going pro. I think we all thought that heading into the season that this is someone who looks like he's going to be an NFL player. So that's Oronde Gadsden. At running back, we're not sure if LeQuint Allen is going pro. I'm high on LeQuint Allen. I really like him. How do NFL talent evaluators feel about LeQuint Allen? That's the question. As far as whether or not he's going to enter the transfer portal, I don't really see the reason for him to, unless some school out there is going to offer him a boatload of money to leave. I mean, I could certainly understand that. So I would say it's more likely that LeQuint Allen is back and not Oronde Gadsden. Obviously, if LeQuint Allen leaves, then running back is something that Syracuse football is definitely going to need in the transfer portal. Definitely, when you look at their position group right now. But assuming Allen stays, you got LeQuint Allen, Will Nixon back from injury, and Yassine Willis again. That's your 1, 2, 3. I think we're all happy with that. Set it and forget it. But it's kind of a need depending on what LeQuint Allen decides to do. Let's assume that Oronde Gadsden leaves. I guess tight end would be a position of need, but you got a 4-star tight end waiting in the wings. Jamie Tremble. He, I think, caught one pass in the Holy Cross game this past season. Plus, Dan Villari, assuming he doesn't leave, is a fine backup. So I think Jamie Tremble could be the starting tight end next season, and you don't have to really worry about tight end. We're going to talk about in a future podcast coming up, while it's still kind of a need because there's someone from Purdue who just entered the portal who I think Syracuse definitely needs to go after for not just tight end reasons, but for maybe getting a big time high school recruit. I'm hinting at a podcast coming up. But I don't think tight end is the most pressing need, even if Oronde, assuming Oronde Gadsden leaves. Obviously, if he doesn't leave, then you can kind of forget tight end. But he's probably going to. Let's talk about defense. Defensive line. You got Fadil Diggs, who's out of eligibility. He had a career-high 7.5 sacks this season. I think in my bold predictions, my quote-unquote bold predictions, I don't like doing bold predictions. I just make predictions and see what happens. But I thought like I thought Fadil Diggs would have like 8 sacks. He finished with 7.5, so I was pretty close. He's out of eligibility. Wouldn't be surprised if he got NFL looks at all. You do have a 4-star waiting in the wings in King Joseph Edwards. King Joseph Edwards had 3 sacks in 1 quarter against Holy Cross. I know it's against Holy Cross, but think about what another offseason, another year of training can do for a guy like King Joseph Edwards. He could be someone who could be a 1-for-1 replacement. I think also when you look at the rest of the defensive line and who you have right now returning, Murad Watson, Rashard Perry, Dennis Jaquez, Deion Wilson, Kevin Jobity, those guys could all return for next year. I mean, they could certainly use an upgrade on their defensive line. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think it's the most pressing need for Syracuse out there. I also want to throw out a caveat here of if 5-star edge rusher Javion Hilson in the class of 2025, if he commits to Syracuse, then this position group goes from, yeah, you could maybe use one to there's no need. There's no need to really spend resources or even a lot of resources on it. Because if you got a guy like 5-star Javion Hilson, he's playing, there you go. So that's how I see the defensive line. It kind of hinges on what 5-star Javion Hilson does, who I think they have a chance at getting. I mean, they're in his top 4. They're in his top 4. We saw the season that Syracuse just had. They certainly got a lot of momentum. And with Fran Brown, you can't count him out with anyone, really. It's kind of nice having a guy like Fran Brown because you know they can be in on so many guys. Whether they're going to get him or not, we're going to have a chance. Which in the past, we would not have a remote chance at a guy like Javion Hilson. A remote chance of getting someone good really in the transfer portal. But we do with a guy like Fran Brown. He's already proven it in 1 season. I think also when you look on defense for some other could certainly use safety. Elijah Clark is out of eligibility, but you do have a 4-star in Demetrius Samuel Jr. coming in. By all accounts, he's going to sign with Syracuse very soon. Perhaps he could be a day 1 starter, but if you want to bring in some competition, fine over there. You don't have to spend significant resources. You also could use 1 starting corner. Clarence Lewis is out of eligibility. 2024 4-star Marcellus Barnes. He's supposed to be back. He's got plenty of years of eligibility left. He got hurt this season, but when he played, he was pretty good. So he's back, hopefully. Jaden Bellamy, I think, is solid, but you could probably use him more as a depth guy. You got Caleb Singleton, a 4-star corner who just committed. Maybe he's the answer at the position. And also, I'll talk about him in the signing day preview. Corner Dwayne Galloway, a 4-star corner. Maybe Syracuse can get him. Maybe he's the answer to be a starting corner. But you're probably looking in the portal for another guy. Is it the most pressing need? Again, no. But you could probably use a starting outside corner. So, what are the kind of needs for Syracuse? Outside receiver, running back, tight end, depending on really what LeQuint Allen and Oronde Gadsden do. Defensive line depends on what Javion Hilson, a 5-star edge in 2025, does. Safety, you might want to bring in some competition, although Demetrius Samuel Jr., a 4-star, probably could be a day 1 starter. And you're probably looking at 1 outside corner. Those are my thoughts on what Syracuse could sort of use, but they're not the most pressing needs. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below.